5 in Western Oregon. This is NBC 16 News at 5.
As protests continue in Eugene, Mayor Lucy Vinis is taking a hard stance against peaceful protests turning violent. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Jacqueline Mazer. Our Stephanie Rothman spoke with the Eugene mayor tonight and joins us live in the studio. Stephanie, Mayor Vinis says the worst of the destruction may be behind us.
Jacqueline, Mayor Vinis says she has confidence in Police Chief Skinner and his officers that they're not interfering with protests and are ready to tackle any riots if they do pop up. Late Friday night and early Saturday mornings, more violent, more young white groups have destroyed property downtown amid what started as peaceful rallies early on. That separate group smashed in windows and broke in storefronts. Now in the daylight, you can see many local businesses have been boarded up, preparing for another potential spat of violence. This pushed local leaders like the mayor to enact a citywide curfew to try and curb the damage.
I think it's very much a day-by-day thing and really a night-by-night. You know, it's not clear at 7 o'clock at night what might be needed at 10 o'clock at night.
The curfew technically expired early this morning, and in the coming days, local leaders will consider whether or not another night of curfew is needed. Mayor Vinis did tell me she can't even remember the last time the city used a curfew. She says it might have been in the 60s when anti-Vietnam War protests were common. It's a stark reminder that when tensions spill over, there's a possibility of violence being used. Next at 5:30, I sit down with Mayor Vinis to discuss George Floyd, protests, what needs to be done at a local level to keep the peace, and much more. Jacqueline.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. Well, with curfews in place for the last 3 nights, we asked city officials what the public needs to know. During curfew, people are not allowed to travel on any public street or in any public place within the area. That includes by car, bicycle, foot, and any other mode of personal transportation. Breaking curfew is a misdemeanor that can result in a $500 fine or jail time or both. City officials say you can stay up to date on current curfew enforcement on the city's website and social media.
Because we'd heard concerns about people not getting, not having that information widely distributed, we did use a different kind of alert that goes, it's like a push notification to cell phones in a specific geographic area.
You can also sign up for text alerts from the city on their webpage. The curfew does not apply to the unhoused, sheltering in place, media, people seeking emergency care, fleeing dangerous situations, or traveling for work or making commercial deliveries.
Tonight, I am not extending the curfew. It's time to move forward.
Mayor Ted Wheeler says he is not extending Portland's curfew for another day. He says the curfew was intended to keep people safe, but after witnessing peaceful protests last night, he decided it's time to move forward. Mayor Wheeler encourages the public to continue working together, find areas of commonality, and break down misconceptions. Minnesota is launching a statewide investigation into the policies and procedures of the Minneapolis Police Department. Governor Tim Walz says the Minnesota Department of Human Rights will lead the probe. The government agency filed a civil rights charge in the death of George Floyd while he was in police custody. Minneapolis police fired the 4 officers involved, but only 1 officer was arrested and charged. Protesters are calling for the other 3 to also be arrested. Walz says he will continue using state resources to institute change.
Minnesotans, you can expect our administration to use every tool at our disposal to try and deconstruct systemic racism that is generations deep. And as we move forward, we're going to need to do it with the community. But I think the thing I'm hearing from the protesters is we're not watching and we don't care what you say. We care what you do.
Minneapolis City Council president called the state investigation an unusual move, but promises the council is on board to cooperate. The family of George Floyd and attorney Ben Crump released plans for memorials and public viewing. This Thursday, a memorial will be held at North Central University in Minneapolis. A public viewing and memorial is scheduled for Saturday in North Carolina, where Floyd's sister lives. George Floyd's funeral is scheduled next week in Houston, where Floyd grew up. We're going to take a live look now at protests happening in Washington, D.C. tonight. This is just one city where protests continue after more than a week since George Floyd's death in hands of police in Minnesota. Chief political correspondent Scott Thuman has the latest from Washington tonight.
President Trump with a moment of silence at the National Shrine Tuesday, promoting freedom of religion. But it's the freedom to assemble and of expression most under scrutiny, especially after the park outside the White House was forcibly emptied Monday so he could walk to a vandalized church for photos.
Some people came out and then beat them so they could clear the area. so the president could come out and go forward. What is that?
I am your president of law and order.
Trump, who's in the past quoted President Reagan's famous peace through strength line, believes his version of it has worked in preventing greater conflicts with Iran, North Korea, and China. In this case, he's calling in thousands of troops to counter the protests and any crime.
The president might also want to open the U.S. Constitution once in a while. If he did, he'd find a thing called the First Amendment.
While some, like Senator Marco Rubio, echo the president's desires for bringing an end to the anarchy, violence, and rioting by any lawful means required, others demand to know what specific requests the president has made of law enforcement, saying they cannot be a, quote, tool of fascism, adding the images and tone matter.
When Richard Nixon did something similar in protests all over the country, after Kent State and after Cambodia, referring to everybody who was protesting as just thugs and unworthies. And he had to walk back those statements because what they accomplished was to further enrage people.
And Joe Biden calling on Congress to immediately pass laws that would outlaw chokeholds and increase oversight for use of force. In Washington, I'm Scott Thuman.
A Douglas County man is sentenced to 60 years in prison in a triple murder case. Adams was a teenager when he was accused of killing his sister, and foster mother at the family's home in Looking Glass near Roseburg. In 2018, he pleaded not guilty to 8 counts of aggravated murder. Adams waived his right to be tried as a juvenile and was tried as an adult at a change of plea hearing in Douglas County. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. Adams could get a second look hearing in 4 years due to Senate Bill 1008, meaning he could be eligible for conditional release after 15 years. Adams will get credit for time served and will have to pay more than $19,000 restitution. Oregon Parks and Recreation Department is expecting to lay off 47 positions by the end of June to fill an estimated $22 million gap in its July 2019 to June 2021 budget. Spokesperson Chris Havel says the number of layoffs and budget gap could change, though. Havel says state park field operations have seen a big reduction already. Most employees are hired seasonally, and only 77 were hired since parks closed down in March. Some state parks opened with limited access last month, and some are now offering limited services to campers as well. Havel says visitors can help by being mindful of park resources. They encourage you to use as little water and power as necessary and are asking visitors to pack out their trash.
Partly cloudy skies remain overhead across western Oregon, but the little bit of sunshine that we have gotten to poke through the clouds definitely keeping our temperatures on the warmer side, 70s and the 80s through the valleys, out along the coast into the 60s. With the clearing skies overhead as we take a look out over the Coburg Hills from earlier on our Tuesday afternoon, definitely seeing those clouds pushing their way out of our area. Maybe a raindrop or two possible over some of the higher elevated spots of the Cascades, but we are still seeing high extreme levels for grasses. Pollen counts remain at really kind of the peak of our peak season, but tonight temperatures falling back into the 40s, and then we do another warm up tomorrow with the return of the sunshine, but I am tracking the potential for some thunderstorms. Those details in my full forecast in just a few.
All right, Josh, thank you. Well, happening tonight, another deadline in a lawsuit filed against Governor Brown over her stay-home order. The plaintiffs, nearly a dozen churches, are under deadline to file a brief with the Supreme Court by the end of today. This includes Elkhorn Baptist Church in Baker County, where a judge ruled the governor exceeded her authority. The state's deadline was last Thursday. Oral arguments will depend on the Supreme Court decision. Statewide, we are looking at more than 4,300 coronavirus cases and 157 deaths. Most of the cases are up in the northern part of the state in Multnomah, Marion, and Washington counties. Taking a closer look by region now, Benton County has 56 cases. Lynn County has 118. Lane County Public Health reports 77 cases and 3 deaths. Deschutes County has 127 total cases. Down in Douglas County, there are a total of 28 cases. Douglas Public Health Network says 25 of those 28 cases have recovered, meaning there are only 3 active cases now. On the coast, Coos County has 31 cases. Douglas County is waiting for word from Governor Brown about beginning phase 2 of reopening. County commissioners applied for phase 2 last week and are hoping to get permission for reopening as early as Friday. Commissioner Chris Boise says the increase in cases are minimal and phase 1 has gone exactly how he imagined it would. He says there hasn't been any set parameters on what phase 2 will look like.
Everything that we're seeing coming from the state has draft written on it in big letters, and it's subject to change. Just for example, restaurants are supposed to be allowed to stay open until 12:30. Gatherings of people supposed to go up to 100.
Douglas County documented 3 new positive coronavirus cases since the start of phase 1. Boise says they're still in great shape regarding testing for and treating the virus. Well, the counties in yellow applied for phase 2 of reopening, including Lane, Douglas, Coos, Lynn, and Deschutes. Their applications are currently under review. If the counties in yellow are approved, they could move to phase 2 as early as this Friday. Multnomah County is the only county that has yet to begin phase 1 of reopening. County leaders will likely apply this week. LCC is offering 1 tuition-free course this summer for high school seniors graduating this year and next year. 2019 GED graduates and those who pass their GED tests in either the reasoning through language arts or math also qualify. The deadline to apply is Monday, June 22nd. Visit lanecc.edu/summer course for all the details. And of course, when we're not broadcasting on television, we continue to bring you the latest developments on our website, NBC16.com, and on our Facebook page at KMTR News. You can also download our KMTR News app on your phone for free. Well, coming up next on NBC 16 at 5, the pandemic is taking its toll on all of us, especially moms-to-be. Learn new ways to cope. Plus, America's economy could take years to recover from the effects of the pandemic, a report from the Congressional Budget Office.